check it's come through. Okay, so we're all good to go. So hi everyone, thanks everyone who joins in and listens to us today. I have Zoe Summerville who's joined us. Thanks, Zoe, for joining us. Zoe's a writer and English teacher, and she's lived all over the world, Japan, France, and the US, and she now lives in Bath with her family. After completing a career writing MA at Bath Spa, Zoe started writing her debut novel, which is inspired by her home country, Norfolk. Her home county, sorry, Norfolk, and the devastating North Sea flood of the 1950s. The Night of the Flood was published in September 2020 by Head of Zeus, and she's currently editing her second novel, The Marsh House, which is set in the same Norfolk coast and is about mothers, daughters, and ghosts, and it's to be published in 2022. So that sounds really interesting as well. So thanks so much for joining us. Would you like to tell us a little bit about The Night of the Flood?
Yeah, so as Jackie just said, it's based on a real flood that happened, and it was one of the worst natural disasters that ever happened in the UK, okay. But it's not particularly well known. And I'm from Norfolk originally. I now live in the southwest of England, but that's where I'm from. But I didn't know that much about it either. Oh, and then I setting a novel in, so I had some characters, and it was definitely going to be set on the Norfolk coast because it's a part of the world that I'm quite inspired by. And then I found out about the flood, and I thought, okay, this is a really good event to show, the cracks in people's relationships, and it's a dramatic event, and also to sort of tell people a bit about what happened then. So, because I'm quite drawn to books that put characters in sort of really difficult situations, and this seemed ideal for my characters. Also, I had these characters that I knew something bad was going to happen to them in their youth, and it turned out, it was exactly then, so it fitted in with everything. So the novel is about two main characters, I suppose. Verity Frost, who lives in this farm, but it's a kind of isolated farm. She's quite lonely. Her mum's dead, and lives with her dad and her brother, who not very communicative. And then it's also about her childhood friend Arthur, who's in love with her. So it starts off with a kind of love story, but then into the mix comes an American airman, because in the 50s, as in the Second World War, lots of Americans were stationed in Norfolk. In fact, there's still some bases now. So I then incorporated what's happening in the world. The Cold War, the beginning of the Cold War into it as well. And so this American airman comes in, and everything all gets thrown up into the air. And then the flood happens, sort of about 2/3 in, I think. And then it's the aftermath of the flood as well, and further drama. So hopefully that sums it up.
And did you want to read a little bit of your book to us?
Yeah, I've got a bit that's actually from the night of the flood itself. So hopefully it'll be fairly self-explanatory. It's not too long either. Okay, so this is a bit that's actually the night itself, and it's from the point of view more or less of Verity herself, and it's her and her brother. So she has a brother, Peter, and he's sort of come to get her from a dance. When they arrived at Leafy Lane, it was a wide running stream already, and they had to dismount and haul themselves in the bike through the cold water. It was up to their ankles, and then as they dragged on, up to their calves. Peter shouted, "Come on, Bear," as she fell behind, but her legs were so slow. He held her hand and pulled her sometimes until they finally stopped and clambered up a small bank on the corner to the farm, where they could see, thank God, lights on in the farmhouse. Breathing heavily, they looked at the water ruining their winter-sown crops. She could smell it too, the smarting salt of the sea. Seawater. No place on the land, she heard her father's voice. Glistening in the moonlight, beautiful and destructive. Peter passed her a small silver flask in silence. She looked up at him, but he wasn't looking at her. It made her think that Peter must be drinking more than she'd realised, that he was becoming like father. She drank the whiskey and spluttered, then drank again. The sweet, cloying, powerful liquid slipped down her throat. "We'll need it," Peter said, taking it back off her, returning it to his pocket, already lowering his long legs back down into the dark water. Oh, God, she said, clutching her stomach. It heaved and buckled, and she felt she had to hold on to it or she would explode. Bloody hell there, she hadn't saying. But she didn't care because she was doubled over, vomiting the whiskey into a black hedge. Later, all she remembered of the last part of the journey was the pain in her legs, the bitterness in her mouth, her tongue swollen. Something hard brushed against her in the water. Fear rose inexorably like the water. At the house, the lights were off on the ground floor. Stumbling, splashing through the wavelets, sloshing around the door, the water almost up to the letterbox. Peter said, "You're here now. Get him up to the top floor and stay there." "What about you?" she wailed. "Are you coming too?" "I've got to check on the animals." He gave her hand a quick squeeze, and she clung onto it. "What about the house, all the furniture, Mother's things?" "And we don't know if Father is." "How do you know he's not out there?" "He won't be. But if he is, I'll find him. I can't wait. The livestock there, the bloody cows. I've already been away too long. It's probably already too late. But I've got to try. We can't afford to lose them. We just can't." His face was contorted in worry. As if from high up in a hot air balloon, she saw what a precarious state the farm was in. It would only take one thing to sweep it away. As he started wading, she was immobilized by helplessness. He just stopped, came back. "Take this, you might need it, but eat something for God's sake." He put the silver hip flask into her cold, wet hand. "You might need it too," she shouted after him, but there was no sign of him in the darkness. Okay.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we've got a few people watching, which is great. Anne said that it sounds really good. And she's wondering how much of your book is fict and how much is fiction and how much is fact.
Do you know, it's such an interesting question. I've thought about this so much because I write historical fiction and it's based in history and it's recent history. So it's the sort of history that you can research by, you can actually talk to people who are around.
Yeah.
You can read books as well. And it's easier to get, like, say, unlike, say, bar historical fiction, I suppose you call it. It's more like you can get the language of it by listening to films and reading books at the time and all that kind of stuff. But actually, yeah, it is based in fact. And everything that happens in the book happens somewhere along the coast, if that makes sense. Not everything happened exactly in that location, because what I did was I did read accounts from the time, and then I sort of picked and chose, that's not the right word, and wove them in, but it wasn't exactly right, because the farmhouse, for example, I made up the location of the farmhouse, so that is fiction. There isn't a farmhouse in that location, but the locations, the names of the streets, the names of everything are all absolutely the same. I use that because actually it gives it more sense of reality, I suppose. And also, loads of things in the flood really did happen, and they really did happen actually in that location as well. So what I based it on a particular town because it's got a really unusual geography, and so loads of things actually happened that are in the book. So there's a torpedo boat that goes onto the quay. That really happened. Okay. Yeah. The bank broke, and houses were destroyed. But some of it. So basically what happened was the flood, it went all the way around the coast and there was no early warning system then. That's was something that came later. It seems so crazy now, doesn't it, that there was nothing like that. But so it was really bad further on down the coast. And so what I did was I put some of that up into Norfolk because that's the location that I know and love. And so it's both. All the characters are fictional as well.
Yeah. I was going to ask that. Yeah. And so did you speak to people who had been in the flood?
No, because I could have done, but no. It's funny. I think if I was writing history, you would have to do that. What I did was, funnily enough, this is odd, but I spoke to my neighbour who at the time, and she was exactly the age of the characters. So she was in her 80s. Yeah. And I spoke to her just about what it was like to be there at the time. It sounds odd. And it was more to get us a sense of, exactly sort of where people were at that time. But I didn't. I read accounts. I think it's because I read somewhere, someone said this once. I think if you interview people, you feel obliged to include their stories in your and I had fictional characters that I wanted to maneuver around. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
And
No,
have
I
you
don't.
had people get back to you who were in the flood, who've read your book
Yes,
and give you?
yes. So that
Yeah.
has happened to me. It's been brilliant, actually. That's been great. So this is funny. I was in a bookshop last week in Norfolk. So I was going to see my family, who were all still there. And I was in a bookshop, I was signing books, and a gentleman came up, he was buying another book, and he said, I'm going to have to buy this book now because that sounds good. And also he said, yeah, I was a child. I mean, he must have been because, actually they would be in their 90s now, actually.
Yeah.
But he was a child, and he said he was further along near Sandringham, actually, where the Queen is has a country house, is further along the coast, actually. But that was is quite near where the flood hit. And he said, yeah, he did. He remembered it, and he remembered the flood water, but he was young. So, but yeah, I have. And then there's other people who've said the same thing. And though they were children, usually they were children, and they remember their parents talking about it.
Yeah. That must be interesting hearing their story. Yeah, their stories afterwards and read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I was a bit worried about thinking, oh, people are going to be concerned that it isn't truthful, but I haven't had anything like that yet.
Okay.
So
yeah,
yes, we'll see.
Yeah. Vivi
Always
said,
worried.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Vivi says she loves your cover of your book. And did you have any options that you could choose from before it was decided, or were you just told what the cover was?
I did. I was so lucky. I think a lot of writers don't get that.
Yeah, I think so.
I've heard that anyway. Because I think the whole book publishing world is so funny, and you write a book and you have no idea what's going to happen with it. And often writers don't get that. I did a whole Pinterest board of ideas because I really love covers. I just think they're often so great, and they really help, don't they, give an idea of what a book's like. So I did this Pinterest board. I don't know if that had any impact, but it's not dissimilar to the ideas I gave them. And then they gave me 4 choices, I think. I can't remember now, but there was slightly different colours, and but actually it was really easy to go, that. Yeah. And I'm really pleased with it. I love it. Yeah.
No,
very
that's
lucky.
good. Yeah. And could you tell us how you got into writing? Is it something that you always thought you'd do, or?
Yeah, okay, so it's more a dream. It was more like a dream, really. It was something I really wanted to do. So when I was a kid, I would write stories. I was that kid, I was like on my grandmother's front, in the garden. I was always writing the garden, and all the time. And I'd write all the time. And then it's probably terrible, but and then life happens, doesn't it? So I ended up. I travelled, as I say in the bio, and then I did lots of travelling, and I probably had time to write, but I think I just felt like it was too difficult. That's honestly, and I was busy living, and also I needed to earn a living, so I didn't really feel like I had time. And then I had children, so I've got 2 kids, and I didn't. Again, I sort of wrote around them a bit, and about so I was teaching. So I suppose I was always around books, which I feel very grateful for because I love them. And so, but I did really want to do it. So after the kids, I worked more part-time. So, and then they started to go to school. I was like, oh, maybe I should do it. So I started writing more seriously then, and then I did a master's, and that was the big thing that really made me take it very seriously, I think. Because I think it's really difficult if you're writing in your spare time to do that. It's really hard, I think, because there's so many people writing books, and it's very, very difficult to feel like you are actually going to do something with it. So, and then it took me ages after the Masters to get it finished and all of that. It took a while.
Yeah. So, and do you still have another job as well? Yeah,
so I don't really, yes, but I do spend much more time on the writing than I used to. I tutor. So I do private tutoring. So because in the English school system, it's like lots of exams. So I do sort of tutoring to help kids with their exams and things like that. So I do still do that, and I'm hoping I'll be able to do some other sorts of teaching at some point.
Yeah,
who knows? Yeah.
And your next book, are you able to tell us anything about that?
Yeah, I think I'm allowed to tell you the title. It's called The Marsh House, and it's set again. It's set near here, further along the coast. Basically, while I was writing this, I spent some time up there, and also I started thinking that it would be such a good location for a ghost story. And actually, there's a very famous ghost story set up on that sort of coast, because it's quite an eerie location. It's quite it's very flat.
Yeah.
It's very flat, and it's quite marshy. So it's like half sea, half land. It's not really one thing or the other. And so and it's about a kind of haunted house story, really. So it's half set in the 30s, when which is an era I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah.
I do love the early 20th century particularly. And then it's partly set in the 1960s, and there in the 1960s there was in England there was a terrible snow event, I suppose. It was called the Big Freeze in 1962. And it went on for months, although my book's only a bit. So yeah, another weather event in this book, and then it goes back to the 30s as well.
Yeah. So. Okay. Sounds interesting too.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. And could you tell us a little bit about how hard or easy it was for you to get that first book published?
Yeah, I mean, I would say not easy. I don't know. I always think, wow, if you can get that done easily, I'm so amazed. But I mean, I think a lot is to do with, well, to me anyway, it was perseverance and probably just the right time. I was quite a bit older. I sort of, I'd already written a book, actually. I wrote a book in my spare time, like while I was teaching and stuff, and looking after the kids, little kids. And I never did anything with it. I think I might have sent it to a couple of agents, got rejected, and I thought, yeah, it's probably not very good, So it got a bit, And then I did the masters, and actually I carried on writing, because I think by that time I realised I really loved it, and I really could do it. I could write a novel, so I could prove to myself I could do it. But yeah, the hardest thing was getting an agent, actually, because I think for fiction you kind of need an agent, and in this market anyway, it seems, and that was really hard. So it took me a long time. I had to, and actually made lots of errors. Like, I sent it off too early, and I got lots of feedback from agents, which was great. That I needed to work on it and work on it and work on it. So I think that's the hardest thing, is thinking, I've written this, but actually I need to rewrite it and then rewrite it. That was tough, really, really horrible. And there's lots of rejection, and it's hard to feel like you can be bothered. Not bothered. It's hard to maintain positivity. Yeah, definitely.
And that first novel you wrote before you did your masters, is that the same one, or that you just...
No, it's totally different. Totally different. And I don't think it'll ever be published, because it was like my first attempt. And actually, some people are very good at weaving in their own lives into their novels, but this had bits of my own life in it. And actually, I just don't think that's what I'm good at. I think I'm much better at writing. I had to write that novel to find that out, though. Yeah. And it was set in the 80s, but so that's when I was young, so it was a bit too close. I think I needed to find out when my era, if that makes sense. Yeah. For me, I think I don't know, I think I write better as a historical novelist.
Yeah. And you said the characters in your book were all fictional. Could you tell us, though, is there any bits of you in them, or people you know?
Yeah.
Or...
Of course, all of them. So, which is weird, because obviously there's male characters in there, but loads of them. And so Verity is she's quite a tricky character. She's not very warm. She's quite lonely. She doesn't really know. She doesn't fit in very well. And I think that's probably what I was like when I was young a bit. But then there's another character called Muriel, who is really she's quite funny sometimes. She's quite straight talking. She's she comes from a working class background, whereas Verity comes from a sort of slightly posh background. And I really loved writing her. And so, I mean, I don't know if I'm like her, but I think bits of me, there's sort of much more kind of straight talking, kind of blunt side of me is her. And so, yeah, I do. And a lot of people said that they really, no, I don't know if they really love her, but, you know, she's quite fun.
Yeah.
And the others are quite serious. And Arthur, the male character, he's got a massive chip on his shoulder about lots of things. Like, you know, there's bits of me in that too, you know, like, you know, resentment, and I put lots of bits of me.
Yeah.
But they're all, you know, from a different era, so it's easier. I don't know. I would not want to write a novel set now, because I think I would. I don't know. I'm fine living this. I don't want to write about it as well.
And could you tell us what you like reading yourself, and if maybe there's something you've been reading lately you want to recommend to us?
Yeah, I do tend to really, really love, and I've realised this sort of belatedly, I really do love historical novels, but I tend to really love the ones that are sort of probably 20th century is my favourite. And I love loads of other books, but I particularly love those. And I've just read this. It's called The Rapture, and it's by a writer called Claire McGlasson. So it's just come out in paperback, I think, and it's called it's about a true story. It's about a group of women who sort of believed they were like the second coming, like the Messiah, in a small town really in England called Bedford. And this is true, and it was called the Panacea Society, and it was in the 1920s. Was it 20s and 1920s, and it's just a really beautiful novel, really beautifully written, and really good. And I do really love that sort of thing. That's where, you know, not necessarily from a true story, actually, that just happens to be, but I just like that era, I think.
Well, thanks for that recommendation. Tony said she's really looking forward to reading your books set in Norfolk. Thank you for writing them. She's wondering if you think you might write future novels set in some of the other countries you've lived before.
You know, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think, you know, I remember I wrote a short story set in New Zealand once. So I went to New Zealand when I was 20 years ago. And it's the only thing, and I also wrote a short story set in Venice when I went there. So sometimes things, I don't write short stories much anymore though, so I don't know. So I have done that. But recently, it's so interesting. My third novel's also, I'm writing that at the moment, and my third novel's also set in Norfolk. It's like I've got a fixation on it. I think I'm going to get out of my system. I don't know.
What sort of genre were your short stories?
Funny enough, ghost stories or kind of relationships. So I quite like both of those things. Yeah, they weren't any particular genre as such. Yeah, I don't tend to write short stories much. Actually, I should go back to it. I think I would love to write a book set somewhere else, because that would be a good research opportunity, wouldn't it? It'd be great.
To go I
should set a book in Australia so I could come. So I don't know is the answer. I don't know. I wouldn't rule out anything, actually.
And can we read your short stories? I'm actually from New Zealand originally.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
I should have heard that in the accent.
You should have.
Do you know, I've never done anything with it. Where are you from?
By Wellington.
Oh, I love Wellington. Brilliant. I had a New Zealand boyfriend, which is why I was there.
Okay.
So years ago, No, I had a lovely time there. Yeah, I did. So funnily enough, I set the story, I remember it now. It was set in Hokitika, which is, I think, setting, of the Luminaries, the book that won the Booker Prize. That had just a coincidence. It was a ghost story. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I might do one day. One day.
Yeah. Sounds interesting. Could you tell us what you think for yourself makes a good story?
Gosh, that's so hard. That's really hard. Okay, I think you have to believe in the characters. You have to believe that they're real, I think. So there has to be, for me, I really like characters that are quite complicated. They aren't necessarily all good or all bad. So I think that's one thing. So the characters have to be sort of believable. You have to believe that they could exist, even, and actually by the end of it, you have to believe that they are. You know, you have to kind of, and actually you probably have to care about at least one of them to care about what happens to them. And then I think actually, I've sort of, this is how I think that actually things have to be difficult for them as well. And they have to be put in some kind of, not necessarily physical danger, but some kind of issue has to be resolved, because I think that tends to be the stories that we all read.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what genre it is, almost, does it? It could be anything, sci-fi or crime or whatever. Something has to be overcome, and because I think that's what gets the readers interested. So you know, what's going to happen? Is this person going to escape this place, or find out who the murderer is, or whatever? So I feel like that is the key. There's got to be something that they have to do, that have to overcome, and it could be internal. If it's a very sort of literary, character-driven novel, it could be something inside themselves, I suppose, or it could be external. It could be both. Yeah, you know. Yeah. So yeah, that's the books that I like, and I think that's most books actually.
Yeah, you do have to have some attachment.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And could you tell us, what do you like doing when you're not writing or reading?
There isn't much else. Okay, actually, you know, I like. So I have two kids, so I like spending time with them when they're being good. They're teenagers now, so spending less time with them.
So they want to spend less time with you.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to spend any time with me, exactly. But I really love. I'm actually quite active because that's quite a good counterpoint to being at home writing all the time. So I really like. I like cycling. I'm not very good at cycling, and I like running. I'm not actually very good at any of this stuff, but I like it. So I do cycling, running, yoga, walking. Walking's probably my favourite. It's the most relaxed, and I like, you know, especially actually I've always liked walking, but especially obviously this last year in lockdown, we have done so many walks, and we're quite lucky. Where Bath is quite green and quite a lot of countryside really, really nearby. So I like exploring, really, and I do like travelling actually. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to do very much recently. But I do love travelling.
And have you started to be able to get out a little bit more now?
Yeah, it's got a bit better actually. I went down to Cornwall, which is another part of England that I've got family in, and I've been to London. It's very exciting, but I haven't been abroad yet. I don't know if I'll be allowed. Some hopefully soon. But I don't know. Yeah, Australia feels very far away, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully you can come and visit us sometime.
Yeah, I know. I've got family in Australia, so I have to come and visit us.
Yeah. And have you been able to, with your book, being able to go to many bookshops or do any lectures?
So I've been quite lucky because the two times that they've come out, so the paperback came out, I know it's a paperback and a hardback here. So the hardback came out in September, and then September was a sort of a bit of a break in lockdown, sort of. It came back again very soon after, and so bookshops were open. So I did go to some bookshops now, August and September. And then recently again. So mostly I've been going to ones around here, and then in Norfolk, where it's from, where the book's set, rather. Yeah. And that's been quite important because even though I don't live there now, it's where I'm from, and the bookshops there have been pretty supportive. Actually, they've been great. So because obviously there's a market, isn't there, for books that are set. Yeah. But also people who are just interested, I suppose. But it's been good to go there, especially.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And Julie's wondering if you treat writing as a job where you write between certain hours or have strict regimes for that, or...
Good question, and the answer is yes and no. I do treat it like a job now, especially because my tutoring is, it depends on the time of year with the tutoring, but if I'm not doing that sort of work, I'm writing, or I'm editing, or I'm plotting, or something like, I'm doing something, and I do treat it like a job in that I suppose, but I used to be, because my children were younger, and I would have to job. I did a lot of the childcare, so it felt like it was very much within the hours of, I don't know, whatever, it would have been 9 and 3, which is the school day.
Mm.
And it felt like it was that. And then afterwards, it was really difficult. And I used to write in the evenings when years ago when they were little, because it was the only time I really had. But I find that quite hard. Now they're older. I don't do. I can write when they're here.
Yeah.
Amazing, because they go off. You know, it's not super easy. So I now kind of write, between the sort of morning, more like a 9 to 5 job actually, to a certain extent. Although saying that, it's not like I need to sort of have a break and go outside or something. But I do treat it like that now. Although again, it's not like a normal job. I don't wish it was, because I'm very lucky. But I do also work. I do write at the weekends as well, because it's not like anything else. It's always there.
Yeah.
So it's like 7 days, but it's 7 days. It's doing something I love, so I'm not complaining. I would never complain. It was always my dream, and I'm doing it, so I feel very grateful. Yeah. But it's all the time.
Yeah, sounds like.
Although not in the evenings. I struggle with the evenings. I have to watch telly in the evening.
Yeah. And do you set yourself a goal of like how many words you might write, or?
Yeah. Well, only in the writing. It's pretty tricky. So the writing of first draft is the only bit you're properly writing. Everything else is playing around with it and editing it. And that's very different. So I don't need a goal for that. But actually writing, my goal, this last one especially, I gave myself the goal for 1,000 words. I can't remember now. It was 5,000 words a week, which isn't very much, but it was doable. And then if I got over that, which I often did, if I'm in a role, then I felt good. So I think my aim was to give myself a goal that I could achieve, and then you kind of feel positive if you get above it. So, because some days are harder than others. Yeah. So 5,000 words a week, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. And can you tell people watching how they can keep up to date with what's going on with you and your books?
Yeah, I mean, I have a website. Yeah. It's not one I do a lot, but it's got information as and when. So the website is, I think it's zoesummerville.com, so it's very simple. And then I do quite a lot of Twitter and Instagram. Okay. So that's more how I interact with people. I do, there's lots of. I find it it's quite a nice. Both of those are quite good. And I do Facebook as well. I do everything. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah. And if readers reach out to you, do you usually find you're able to reply back? And
absolutely, definitely. Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's lovely. I feel very grateful to have readers. Yeah, definitely, it's really nice.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks so much for joining us. Been great to chat to you, and thanks to everyone who joined in and the questions.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully we might be able to talk to you another time when you have your new book out.
Yes, that's very exciting. Can't wait.
Yeah. Thank you, and bye, everybody.
Bye.